Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome here to the roundtable related to global challenges to grant access to medication, the International Symposium on Mucopolysaccharidosis and Related Disorders. My name is Frances Palau. I am the head of genetics and Department of Genetics and Rare Diseases at the San Juan de Déu Children's Hospital in Barcelona, Spain. And it's my pleasure to introduce you the four speakers today in this roundtable in relation to the medication. I'm going to introduce all together. First of all, I have to say that one of them, Julian Isla, is part of is a member of the Committee on Orphan Drugs and Medicines from the medical products of the European Medicines Agency, just as a disclosure. But the first person I am going to introduce is Dr. Hernán Amartino. Dr. Amartino is medical doctor, graduated at the University of Buenos Aires in Argentina, specialized in pediatric neurology. Currently, he is the head of child neurology department and director of the MPS clinic at Hospital Austral University Hospital, where he is also the associate professor of pediatrics at the Austral University and director of postgraduate courses in clinical genetics and inherited metabolic diseases and principal investigators in clinical trials for rare diseases, specifically for lysosomal storage disorders. He is going to be the first speaker, or he is going to answer the first question that we are addressing to all the speakers. The second one is Julian Isla. He is the Chief Scientific Officer of the European Dravet Syndrome Federation and European Organization of Patients with Dravet Syndrome. And Julian founded the Dravet Syndrome Foundation 10 years ago. Julian is the father of Sergio, a young boy, 12 years old, who has Dravet syndrome. And he's by training a software engineer working at Microsoft, but also, as I mentioned before, a member of the Committee of Orphan Drugs and Medical Products of the European Medicine Agency. We have also Alba Ancochea. Alba is over a decade of experience and commitment in implementing and planning policies, programs, and social health projects in the field of rare diseases. Since 2009, she has been actively involved in the Spanish Federation of Rare Diseases, FEDER, which gathered 370 patient organizations from Spain, and since 2012, she is the organization's CEO. She has a lot of experience in the field of rare diseases, especially related to the patients and patients associations. And the last one is Tony Montserrat Moliner, responsible for the policies on rare diseases and cancer at the Public Health Directorate of the European Commission from 2004 to 2017, initiator of the Commission communication, the Council recommendation on rare diseases from the European Commission, and currently he is active senior of public health for the European Commission. But along with activity, he joins Alan Maladiga Board of Directors in Luxembourg in 2018, Vice President of the Steering Committee of the National Plan for Rare Diseases and supervisor of the creation of the Luxembourg Registry on Rare Diseases. He is also a member of the Scientific Committee of the FEDER Foundation in Spain. So thank you for coming, all of you, and thank you for participating in this roundtable. And I'm going to give you several questions. The first one is addressing first option to Dr. Hernán Amartino. The question is related to the therapy, that to focus the topic. So which are the main types of therapies and medication in MPS? How to address the integrative approach of MPS patients? Hernán, Dr. Amartino.
Thank you, Frances. Thank you for your kind introduction, and hello, everybody. Here I'm in the South Hemisphere. I'm from the winter. I know you are spending your summer there in Europe, many of my colleagues. Addressing your question about current therapies for MPSs, let me at first remind all of you that MPSs are a group of very complex genetic diseases with a lot of clinical manifestations that are all progressive, that are all chronic, all lead to handicap in children and adult people with a short expectancy of life many times. And there were no specific treatment that could change the natural history until the last 20 years. So the history of the MPSs have changed radically in the new century with the rising of a specific treatment. And the first approved treatment that we have for some of the MPSs is the enzyme replacement therapy. We, of course, had before that some attempt with the hematopoietic stem cell transplantation that is still a first option treatment for some MPSs like MPS 1 in the severe form, the Hurler syndrome. And there are also, of course, option indications for transplantation for other MPSs. But to treat a patient with MPS is something much more complex that only give an infusion of a protein, of an enzyme. It's a medical care that should be performed by a team of specialists and professionals for many specialties in a medium to high complexity health system care or hospitals. So I'm speaking as a Latin American doctor. I'm part of the developing part of the world. I'm talking on behalf of the MPS community from a huge continent that is Latin America, with 600 million people living and maybe 40 countries, and huge social and economic problems and disparities that affect the health care of our patients, of course. And for rare diseases like MPSs, this is especially noticed or marked because the challenges appear much more clear. So we've got the ERT, the enzyme replacement therapy, for 5 of the MPSs. And there are no, in Latin America, for example, a kind of organization that as you have in Europe, as a road that you have a continent policy about access to these high-cost medications. Every country here has a local policy. More of them has no regulation at all about rare diseases. There are exceptions like Argentina, Chile, Brazil, Colombia has more pathway run in this way. But we've got several big challenges to access the specific treatment for our patients in every situation. In Argentina, for example, today, more than half of our population lives under the line of poverty. The social needs that are unmet, and of course, this repercuting in the quality of the medical care that we can offer to our patients. But in the other way, there are other MPSs, like as we know, ERT is available for MPS 1, for MPS 2, for MPS 4A, for MPS 6, for MPS 7, but today there are no approved treatment for all the MPS 3s, A, B, C, D, San Filippo's. And we've got another big challenge for the neuronopathic MPSs, because the ERT do not cross the blood-brain barrier, so the neurodegeneration, the neurological changes are not well treated with the conventional ERT. So since last years, we've got a lot of trials, new developments, new approaches, like the intrathecal ERT, like the new technology of fusion protein that is very interesting and exciting. And of course, we've got many attempts of and clinical trials running with gene therapy for several MPSs, especially for MPS A and B, 3A and B. But at this point, our patients in Latin America, for example, have another special challenge, that is that access to clinical trials that are mainly run in clinical sites in US or Europe are also much more difficult for them. And of course, all of the families are desperate and always trying to give a chance and to participate early in the disease in these kinds of trials. So the challenges for MPS treatment, that is something that all the MPS community along the world, of course, have to face, could be more acute in the parts of the world that are still with economic and social, that are peripheral, we are still under development. So my point of view here, and I would like to address this topic because it's a global meeting, is that we need to globalize not also the access to approved therapies, but also to the clinical trials and the efforts that science and medicine is making for MPSs with the new therapies. So this is, I think, the panorama, and I think the question, Francis, and I would like to, if possible, in the end of the session, discuss with my colleagues about this.
Yes, thank you very much, Dr. Martino. Thank you, Hernan. I think we have to move. We will move now to the next question, because maybe you have pointed out many of the aspects, not only the pharmacological aspects of treatments aspect, but also the access to other treatment or management, and also including the clinical trials in Latin America and other kind of countries that are not belonging to the Europe or to North America, or to the major, the first world, that is not a nice expression in our world. So I think we can move, because you mentioned several important things, to the next question, to Julian Isla. Julian, which is the vision, your vision from your own experience, but also from the Committee of Orphan Drugs and Medicines, Products Medicines, from the European Medicines Agency, and which is the real situation from your point of view and your experience about the roles of regulatory agencies for drug designation as for orphan drugs, and also the regulation of clinical trials and so on.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for the question, Frances, Paco. Well, I guess I've been working with the Orphan Drug Committee during the last 6 years. First of all, like a patient expert, and the last 3 years as a full member. And right now, the situation is amazing, because we are starting to see how the rise of gene therapies is coming. It's getting real. You know, gene therapies has been a promise during the last decade, I will say, you know, with promising treatments, with some fails, with a lot of development. But right now we can see, you know, like this is getting real. And it's the same situation for MPS, I guess, that for other rare diseases, right? We are moving we are exploring new treatments because we are coming for pharmacological treatment of symptoms to try to cure the disease. And the disease modifier, and this is the terminology that we use for these treatments, able to cure, because we don't say cure. We really say disease modifiers, and they are coming for other conditions. We have very good examples of promising treatments, and we are starting to see how these new approaches are approaching to MPS conditions. The question I have, because, and also it's a question from my colleagues of the panel, is because this panel is for access to these treatments, And one of the problems with gene therapy is they are risky. It's a risky treatment, And risk means that the industry has to manage this risk and take the risk. And in order to take that risk, probably you will need money. Because you have to pay insurance, you have to pay a high-cost drug development process. That means that gene therapies could be expensive. And we have examples right now. We have examples of gene therapies, and the cost is half $500,000 per patient per year. Or, well, depending if this is a one-shot treatment, maybe it's $500,000 per patient. But it's a lot of money in any case, right? The question that we are going to face sooner or later is how we are able to reduce this development price and the final price. Because if we are successful and we create gene therapies for MPS conditions and they are in the market, the companies will have to get a price and they will have to get reimbursement. And considering that we are lucky living in a high developed country, the question will be much more important for countries not so developed, as Dr. Amartino pointed, countries in South America, countries in Africa, where the maturity of the healthcare system is not so high. So my reflection also, and just to open a conversation with the panel, is how we can make sure the development of these drugs and the cost of access is affordable for the majority of the patients with MPS, because one of the problems that we are facing right now in the condition of my son is the companies developing treatments for Dravet syndrome are focusing just in US and Europe. And in Europe, just in 5 countries, the big 5s. And what happened with the rest? We are going to leave people behind. Thank you, Frances.
Thank you very much. I think we can start a discussion about this point, but if you agree, maybe we listen to Alba as a representative of National Federation of Patients on rare diseases, but also representative of the European Continental Alliance, that is EURORDIS, European Rare Diseases Federation. So we can listen to you, Alba, and about co-chair about these ideas and how to work with the regulatory situation. Alba?
Thanks very much. Yes. Now, we are all agree about the need of facing rare diseases challenges in terms of access from a joint perspective, referring to Hernan intervention, FEDER, EURORDIS, RDI. We all encourage a global movement for extending that continental policy framework to a global one, because the access in Europe is much better than in other points of the world, but as Julian said, there is still a lot to do to guarantee a real access. From a European perspective, as the European Commission points out, in the orphan medicine products impact assessment, one of the main problems identified is the evaluation of the legislation for medicines for rare diseases is unequal availability, delayed access, and often unaffordable treatment for patients in the EU member states. As a background, I'm going to have a look to the figures reported by an orphanage article published in 2019, Unfortunately, data has not evolved too much along the last 2 years, and if it does, it's for getting worse. The article refers authorized orphan medicine products are most widely accessible in Germany and in France, 93% and 81% respectively. In between 40% and 60% of products reimbursed are countries as Italy, Spain, or UK. And finally, below 40%, we can find countries as Scotland, Poland, or Wales. Nevertheless, the problem is not only the reduced amount of products accessible, but also the time it takes to set a price and reimbursement. The time elapsed is present in almost every country except for Germany. If we put the focus on Spain, the percentage of products marketed in Spain right now is 46%. And the average of time to get a price and reimbursement is in 18 months. I must say that once a drug receives a price, it doesn't guarantee a definitive access. Then families have to face regional and hospital barriers. We must add to the time in between, authorization time, the time in between the doctor prescription, when there is, and the real administration to patient. And that sometimes takes up to 12 more months waiting for a hospital pharmaceutical committee decision, a subsequent regional administration approvals. In the same line, inequity is present in access to compassionate use and off-label use medicines. Apparently, the main rationale of this diversity on access is a lack of alignment between orphan medicine products companies, payers, prescribers, and patient needs, as well as heterogeneous regulatory at national level on HTA and price and reimbursement procedures and requirements. The imbalance of negotiating power between the marketing authorization holder, which holds a medicine for an unmet medical need, and the payers at the national healthcare system is also a fundamental issue. In short, a matter of financing, regulation, and collaboration is conditioning the availability, affordability, and access to treatments. But if we refer to Universal Health Coverage Declaration, Human Rights Council Resolution, or the third Sustainable Developmental Goal, which aims to achieve universal health coverage and access to quality essential healthcare services, and as Julian also said, leaving no one behind, then it's logical that people living with a rare disease expect to benefit from therapies and do it rapidly and fully all across Europe, and as soon as they are approved. That is why patients, through their national alliances and through Eurordis, call for a new model based on a collective collaboration involving all stakeholders, patients, the pharmaceutical industry, national competent authorities, national health ministries, researchers, scientists, and the European Medicine Agency. This model includes necessarily an early dialogue, a creation of European funds, and a scale of incentives. An early dialogue between all relevant stakeholders, but in every stage, from discussing the points to consider for a product development to the assessment of the value and the decision maker. The creation of a European fund to support the generation of additional real-world evidence data in the years following marketing authorization. And it also should be done linked with research structures like the European Reference Network or European Joint Program for Rare Diseases, or IRDIC. And for last and not least, working on a matrix on incentives for orphan drugs development that is going to be tackled by the next speakers, and must combine different possibilities depending on the disease and the unmet needs.
Thank you very much, Alba. I think we are talking about important topics from the patients, directly from the patients. So we have a number of questions that to address, but I think we are moving to the next question and then talking together all of them and the specific point that you have mentioned and maybe interesting for discussion in the round table. So the last one question is firstly addressed to Antoni Montserrat. The question, because of your own experience in between patients currently, but also in the European Commission, still as a member of advisory board of European Commission. The question is how to make bridges between patient organization at national but also transnational level with transnational and national health authorities, like European Commission in the case that is you may experience, regulatory agencies, pharma and biotech companies. How to create good bridges in between all these stakeholders. Tony?
Thank you, Frances, for the question. We will probably mention several times the European Medicines Agency, and let me for a moment to do a personal comment, because this week we had an enormous loss because Jordi Linares Garcia, the head of the Innovation and Research in the European Medicines Agency, passed away. And I think it's a very, very sad news for the rare diseases community. And going to your question, it's very clear that the model that the European Commission introduced from the beginning in 2008 to 2009, with approval of the first regulatory, we can say, decisions about how to organize the policy of rare diseases in Europe, has been always a model in which the participation of patients' organization has been taken as a very essential point. During a lot of years, we had in Europe the USER, the European Union Committee of Rare Diseases Experts, replaced after by an expert group on rare diseases. And always in this group, which was the governance of the rare diseases policy in Europe, the patients' organizations were represented. Unfortunately, this type of structure was discontinued in 2016. And now, unfortunately, there is no central point in which patients' organizations can directly participate in the design of the rare diseases policy in Europe. This design has also been implemented via different projects. For instance, I will mention some of them in which the participation of the patients' organizations was essential. For instance, the project Europlan permitted that from a starting point of only 4 countries having a rare diseases national plan in 2008 to today, where we have 25 member states with a national plan of rare diseases. Europlan has been a success, and it has been a success essentially by the activity of Eurodis and the national rare diseases organizations. EPIRAR could be another project in which it was the idea of creating a European platform of rare diseases registration, which exists now and tries to coordinate the efforts of practically 700 rare diseases registries existing in Europe. And there also, again, the participation of the rare diseases organizations is absolutely essential for the success of the rare diseases registration policy. And of course, after we arrive to the participation in the regulatory bodies, and Julian has remembered his participation, his personal participation in the Committee of Orphan Medicinal Products, but the representation of patients' organization is not only in the COMP. The patients' organizations are also represented in the Pediatric Committee, in the PRAC, the Pharmacovigilance Risk Assessment Committee, in the Scientific Advice Working Party, in the Committee for Medicinal Products for Human Use, etc., etc. At the level of the European Medicines Agency and at the level of the Joint Research Center, where the European Platform for Rare Diseases Registration is being developed, the participation of patient organizations is very important. And that, I think, is a characteristic of the European model, because you cannot find the same thing in United States, in Canada, or in another parts of the world. That has led for certain conclusions that sometimes I cannot absolutely share. For instance, Alba mentioned it before, the implementation report about the orphan medicinal products and the pediatric legislation. And 2 of the conclusions of this implementation report released during the year 2020 concludes that it's very important that in the future, the EMA, the European Medicines Agency, and the FDA, the regulatory body in the United States, cooperates together and does, if possible, final conclusions about medications together. And the rest of the world, what happens with the rest of the world? There are no regulatory bodies in the rest of the world. There are no possibilities of cooperation with the rest of the world. I think this is something that probably we need to highlight during the discussions that will probably be in place during a certain number of years about the modifications in the orphan drugs regulation. But concluding, I think that in Europe we have a good model in terms of cooperation between the European institutions and the patients' organizations. I think we have a good model, but incomplete, in the relations between the regulatory bodies and the patients' organizations. But we need certainly to complete this model with a superior and a very large cooperation with the rest of the world, and expanding a part of this model at national level, because sometimes, and unfortunately not always, the participation of the patients' organizations in the national bodies regulating the rare diseases policy is the ideal that it should be in an ideal situation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tony. I think we have enough time for discussion now in this way. So we have raised some relevant questions that we can discuss. You can take your raise the hand with the computer or inside of yourself, but also waiting for having questions from the audience. I would like to start with something that Julian Isla said, that is the risk. And I think the risk, you mentioned that in relation to the future for gene therapy, I mean, the current situation, the present, but also for the close future of gene therapy for a number of genetic diseases in relation to the access, I think, to the access of this medication. I'm thinking not only European or the American level and Canadian level, but also in the whole world, in a global approach to the topic or to the question. So, which are the major challenges about this risk, the access, and the sensation that people have living even in the developed countries, but from the global perspective also. So, for instance, Hernan, what do you think about that? What, from your own experience as a medical doctor devoted to this kind of diseases, but also from Latin America that is not in all developed countries, which is your impression about that?
Well, it's a very important topic, I think. The risk for, especially for the patients and families, but also for the whole health system care and society, and also the risk for the industry and the development of new knowledge and therapies. We've got facing with the MPSs in particular with progressive and severe diseases. And so a patient that is early diagnosed has much more chances to change the natural history with an appropriate treatment, wherever it was, that a patient that is severely affected or is advanced in an advanced stage of disease. So for the point of view of the developing world, we've got here the big problem, the big challenge of the subdiagnosis or the late diagnosis of our patients that have a direct influence in the risk of the implementation of new therapies and high-cost therapies. Because if we don't have any regulation from the national or international guidelines about. We don't have here any agency, as Julian and Anthony have mentioned, also Alba, that can homogenize based on evidence and knowledge with the participation of advocacy groups, of course, can homogenize the criteria of indication of treatments and standard of care. So if we do not have, if we want not to collapse with the new era of the gene therapies and the many new therapies that are we all expecting, we need to use our the best of our knowledge and organization and dialogue to create some kind of agency and guideline and to give the chance for those patients and families that have the chance. And there is something that we well know, unfortunately, can put on the hands only of the advocacy groups or family associations that always will want a chance for any treatment in any stage or any clinical scenario. There's something that should be clearly established in base of the evidence and with the participation of all the actors in this complex scenario of rare diseases, and in MPS in particular is much more necessary. I don't think if I put the point clear.
I think so, yes. Thank you very much, Nan. So taking your comments now to the major question I have in my mind or coming to my mind is, we have some treatments. We are expecting to have, because there is research on the rare, to have new treatments, new therapies, mainly gene therapies. Not only, but mainly gene therapies. But what we have to apply for people is the health system in every country, in developed and developing countries, both public and private health systems. So from the perspective of the agency, one agency, in this case of the European medicine agencies, the other one is the FDA, and there are not any other agency that we know. How you have the point of view related to the health systems, national health systems, to really buffering the new treatment that is really expensive, but not only because they are expensive, also to manage this new treatment, these new treatments to distribute to patients. Julian, what do you think about that?
Well, unfortunately, this is out of the competencies of the European Medicine Agency, because we are just responsible of giving the orphan drug designation, and the CHMP is responsible for marketing authorization. That's all. The work of the EMA stops at that point.
Yes.
But from a let's say patient point of view, Frances, I guess there's an important question, you know. And when I talk about risk, something that surprised a lot to me is how we are making a risk assessment from a regulatory science point of view, right? Because the risk assessment process is more or less the same process for all diseases. It doesn't matter the severity on the condition and the progress on the condition, more or less, right? The framework is more or less the same. And the question I always have to my colleagues from the EMA, from the different committees, as Antonio already mentioned, there are patients representative in the pediatric committee, pharmacovigilance committee, and I have always the same question. When you are discussing risk for a given therapy, ask the patient. Because, for example, for MPS, in most of the cases, MPS is a devastating condition, right? The people will die. So the risk that we are willing to take as caregivers for these patients is much more higher than the risk that another person could take. This is something that I will explain to the companies. As a father of a child, with the expectancy of life for my son is around 20, 30 years. I don't care about privacy. I don't care about, if he will be able to get a job. It's not under my area of, interest right now, because my main goal is to allow him to live more years. That's all. It's very simple. So when you are in this situation, the risk that you are willing to take is much more higher. And we are not considering this input from patients in regulatory decisions about risk, right? We have the mechanisms. We have patient representative. We have people participating in scientific advice, but we have to educate as patients to the regulators that this is needed. Because everything in science, in medicine, in drug development is designed to avoid risk. Everything. And this framework doesn't work for us. That's my personal opinion, right? It's totally a personal opinion.
I agree with you that we as the medical doctors, even the scientists, we are, maybe because experience, and make decisions is not so easy because it's making decisions for a number of patients and individuals. But we don't used to be risky people. And maybe we have to change our mind in this way, at least in some cases, at least in rare diseases, in MPS that are really devastating diseases. What do you think, Alba and Tony? Alba, what do you think about this point? Because we have not so much time, but it's an interesting point, interesting topic.
Yeah.
And I think sorry, yes.
No, regarding introducing the advanced therapies, one of the main concerns of patient organization is the expectations, because advanced therapies are the closest we've been ever to a cure or something similar to a cure, but just a few diseases are being researched to develop an advanced therapy, and inside of these diseases, just a few are eligible to be treated with advanced therapies. So I think this is an issue, a topic that must be addressed, because we are setting huge expectations. And at the end, it's not only a question of access, it's also a question to be the right person to receive this kind of treatment. So I think we should be much more prudent and also face it from a psychological perspective, because this is going to be a very sensible issue. That's from one hand. Regarding the patient participation, a real HTA patient participation is still pending in many countries. For example, in Spain, we respect the Spanish Medicine Agency. In fact, the person that is, or everyone there, they are right persons and very close and supportive. But we must say that apart from the staff, that they have personal involvement. If we refer to the system, the positioning therapeutic report procedure doesn't involve patients. Patient engagement in therapeutic positioning reports consists in a consultation, sending to patient organization a big portfolio of scientific documents and giving us the chance to send our comments in 15 days time. It's an open format with no explanation, no discussion, no interaction. It's the patient organization itself, the one that delivered the answer, but there are no expert patients, as Julian in the being part of the process. So this is just a kind of consultation, and I think the real HTA patient participation also must be reviewed for not only in Spain but also to the national level to every country.
Ani, some comments?
Yes, well, probably we will be very happy if one day we have in the area of rare diseases something similar at international level as it exists for the cancer. The International Agency for Research of Cancer, the IAC in Lyon, could be a model of what we one day maybe we want to have in the area of rare diseases. The problem is that unfortunately at the level of the United Nations, and Alba knows this probably better than me, only it will be after the summer the plenary of the General Assembly of the United Nations will adopt for the first time a resolution in which recognizes the importance of the fight against rare diseases at the world level in 2021. Well, it's a clear demonstration of the inequalities of the situation related to rare diseases at global level. But we have a success story, which I think it's important to notice, which is the IRDRIC. The IRDRIC is the International Consortium for Rare Diseases Investigation Research. IRDRIC has been an excellent model of cooperation between the United States, the European Union, Canada, South Korea, Singapore, and other countries. And I think it has been a success in the sense of that in the first program, they said we will have 200 therapies in 2020. They reached the objective. They had 200 new therapies for rare diseases in 2020. Of course, I know that we have 77,000 rare diseases, but the example of the good cooperation at international level between countries in the area of research is maybe something that could inspire that something similar maybe it's necessary and could be done also in order to do a better coordination at international level for rare diseases. MPS finally is a disease having a reduced number of patients in Europe, a reduced number of patients in the United States, a reduced number of patients in Argentina, etc. And we need an international cooperation because sometimes for a lot of rare diseases, if we don't have a world perspective, it will be very, very hard and practically impossible to advance and to obtain the necessary advances in terms of therapy and in terms of research.
Thank you. I really believe that if the United Nations is going to take that recommendation of that resolution at the end or after the summer, is going to be really very important because it's the way to give the voice to the global countries, I mean, to the world as a whole, and trying to move, for instance, in the case of MPS, moving not only for some countries, some continents, but also for the whole world, and it's the way that possible to give possibilities to people living in everywhere. Difficult, but open the possibilities. We have not any question from the audience, so we still have 3.5 minutes, I think. So try to answer this question that is not exactly related to the access, but it's related to what is expected from the new therapies, the current and new therapies. Do you think that patients and families expected that or believe that changing in a significant way natural history could be identical to cure, to full cure of the disease in this moment? I'm talking about something like diabetes and insulin. Insulin is not curing the disease, but it's changing the natural history and the prognosis and the future of people with diabetes that is insulin dependent. I'm talking about juvenile diabetes, diabetes. Do you think that changing that natural history to improve the quality of life in the future is something expected and very well recognized from the families and patients in front of the whole cure?
If I can take this question, I will be short to give some time for my colleagues as well. I think the gene therapy has the potential to be disease modifier. I'm not sure it's going to be a cure, but could be a disease modifier. And the most important thing, don't forget advanced therapies. From a regulatory point of view, gene therapy is not an advanced therapy. Advanced therapy, for example, is when you are using RNA or this type of, but they are very promising as well in other conditions. And don't forget also advanced therapies on top of gene therapy.
Oh, we are talking about spinal muscular dystrophy that has also gene therapy now. It has a different, gene, molecular modifier that is working at least
Yeah.
for patients.
This is the perfect example. Paco, the
Hernan,
perfect one.
Alba, Tony.
I would like to comment that it will be important to think about populational screening for MPSs if we've got to have the better impact of new therapies. I don't believe that new advanced therapies, as commented, could be compared with a cure, but of course there are disease modifiers and dramatically will improve the expectancy of life and the quality of life of our patients, and but it will also critical the early diagnosis, and so we have to think in a gestaltic, in a global way to approach the disease, and also the national policies should contemplate the neonatal of at-risk screening programs. That's, I think, my point of view.
Tony, Alba, Tony, some comments?
Yeah.
A minute.
From my point of view, 20 years ago, there was nothing for rare diseases. Now, 5% of rare diseases, there are a kind of treatment that may be delay the advance of the disease. And now we have the chance to change the natural history of the disease. So I think we go step by step, and this is very promising and hopeful for the rare disease community.
I will say only that I agree completely with Hernan. Now, EuroDis is trying to implement at the European level the key principles for newborn screening. If we reach to have a good newborn screening for MPS, that will be an enormous advance, an enormous start for having a better situation for these patients.
Thank you, sir. Talking about this topic, just to say that we are now from St. John de Dios Children's Hospital and also in Madrid, the Center of Molecular Diagnosis at the University Autonomous of Madrid. We have now a project to implement, and it's a project, but to know what's really happened, and how to use, how to implement newborn genetic screening. So we are in this way, and really we think that it's going to be very nice. We have some results, discussion about pre-test, post-test, the role of the genetic counselors, laboratory, and so on. I think we are trying to do something our best in that way. Thank you very much, all of you, Alba, Tony, Julian, Hernan, from Madrid, from Galicia, from Spain, from Luxembourg, from Argentina. Thank you very much to join us, to explain very well what you think, your thoughts about that. Thank you for giving some aspects and some perspective about the real situation of MPS and rare diseases as a whole from the therapeutic point of view. Thank you very much. And now it's my pleasure to introduce the next speaker, that is Dr. Elisa Leal Teles from Portugal. She's going to give a talk related to the best practice in clinical management and specifically intra and inter-center coordination. Thank you for joining us to attend this roundtable, and for the next time, bye-bye.